Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 19 of Conflicts of Interest. I am the co-host Kyle Anslone, and I'm joined by the other co-host Will Porter. Will, how's it going today?
Doing all right, Kyle. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. We got an interesting show, some domestic politics to start off with here today before getting into Elon Musk, anywhere on the planet, immediate missile delivery system. And yeah, it sounds as crazy as that once we get into all the actual details. But make sure before, we get into all the news, people take the time, share the show, subscribe to it. You can find it online at the Libertarian Institute, on YouTube at the show, Conflicts of Interest, or, just follow me and Will on Twitter. I'm at Kyle Anslone _. He's at the Will Porter. We tweet out all of our work there. So, Will, let's get into the first story here. And I believe this is one that you actually wrote up at RT. And Ohio County Elections Board confirms mailing 500,000 or 50,000, wrong ballots denies Trump's rigged race claim. And the reason I find this story interesting, Will, isn't necessarily that these particular 50,000 ballots in Ohio, but just that this is probably something that's happening in Ohio, and then there's 50,000 ballots in other states and like other little districts. And so I assume this is just one event of many. And I want to talk a little bit about it because obviously this is really complicated for something that a lot of the, country, a lot of the Americans see as extremely important. And, they put all their faith in the integrity of our elections. And this certainly makes it seem like, maybe this isn't going so well. So Will, tell us about this particular incident in Ohio.
Yeah, sure. So we're talking about a county elections board in Ohio that came out on Friday, I think, and it basically had to admit, they were forced to admit that nearly 50,000 ballots were sent out, or excuse me, 50,000 incorrect ballots were sent out to voters across this county. And Franklin County in Ohio is the seat of the state capital. It's like the most populous county, so it is like a major district in Ohio. And so we're not talking about like 50,000 ballots in just some like relatively small town, so that the whole population of a small town or something. But nonetheless, that is still a pretty significant number that we're talking about here in terms of like erroneous ballots, where they were either sent to just like the wrong address, or they were sent to people for the wrong congressional race in the wrong precinct. But yeah, I mean, you have tens of thousands of these ballots going to the wrong houses, basically. And apparently the elections board tried to explain this. They're saying that somebody pressed a wrong button. They put the wrong setting on a machine that like packs the ballots into envelopes. So that's sort of their explanation. And they claim they were going to be able to correct this within 72 hours and get all the correct ballots sent out to all the right addresses. But I'm kind of skeptical that they'll have this all sorted out in that time. I mean, we're talking about like this is 20% of the ballots in total that they mailed out so far in this county. And, now we have tens of thousands of these ballots out there, which seems to maybe create the potential for fraud. Like if you have these things floating around, you might have some people going and trying to fill out both. They receive two ballots and they might try to fill one out and, submit them at different polling stations or whatever.
Well, and then
oh, go ahead.
what happens if somebody just gets confused and sends in the wrong ballot? I know, a lot of people, at least especially my millennial friends, definitely don't check their mailbox every day, maybe once a week. And so if you just get two ballots in the mail, what if you fill out the wrong one and send that one back in? It seems like there's going to be a lot of issues with everybody having two ballots and one being incorrect, especially when, a lot of Americans, just don't pay that close attention to news, especially local news. And if you don't know this is going on, what's their plan? Are they going to go knock on all the doors and try to get back these 50,000 ballots or something?
Yeah, I mean the county, they claim they have some kind of they said they have strong measures in place to ensure that people aren't double voting. Like you said, it might not be fraud, it might just be an accident, or people are confused about how to do this. Because this is getting a little complicated now. You have two ballots and you're not quite sure which one is the correct one. But I'm forgive me if I'm a little skeptical that their strong measures will prevent all of these from we'll sort this whole thing out. You may have a lot of people, you may have thousands of people who end up trying to vote and their vote is invalid, and then you might also have the potential for people who do end up voting twice and the system doesn't catch them, and so you do sort of have whether it's fraud or not, you do have sort of this anomaly where some people might be voting twice. So some might not vote at all and some might end up voting twice. And so I think some of the claims about like a fraud in mail-in voting might be a little over the top, like the claims that it's just going to be like a totally garbage result in the election. But I do sort of think like it's ridiculous that you can't even raise the possibility that there might be some problem with like universal mail-in voting. Like we are starting to see these problems crop up. 50,000 ballots in this, Ohio County, 50,000 ballots in another county. Like before you know it, you are talking about significant numbers of people whose vote either is like fraudulent or invalid in one way or another. And so I think it is valid to raise some possible concerns about universal mail-in the system.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of examples, especially these swing states. I believe I've actually lived in Missouri in '08 with McCain and Obama was decided by tens of thousands of votes. And then the last time around, New Hampshire was decided by, I think, under 10,000 votes, but definitely under 20,000. So, like, these elections could be within, this margin right here, this 50,000 number. And so I think it's again, especially if this is just one example of many, it's going to cast a lot of doubt on the outcome of the election. Now, I guess if it's a landslide where every state is won by several million votes and a 10% margin, this may not turn out to be such a big deal. And my particular concern isn't even like we need to have free and fair elections and that kind of thing. But if people don't feel like the elections are fair, then I'm guessing we're going to see a lot of like protesting that will probably turn into rioting, depending on whose side wins or loses. And this is something, to talk about and say like, hey, we have this real problem with mail-in voting. And also, I read like 2 million people have already voted now, Will. So, let's not even say there's a problem with the ballots or something, but just that somebody drops off of the ballot in that time. We've talked in the past how we have old presidential candidates. Everybody knows Joe Biden's in bad health. Most of the people I talk to who are voting for him don't really expect him to make it through the first term. So I don't know if you have any idea the answer to this question, Will, or if this is maybe just a complete hypothetical, but something we should really consider. If Joe Biden is unable to make it to the election day, and Kamala Harris then maybe becomes the nominee, what happens to all those ballots of people who voted for Joe Biden to be president? That seems to be a real question mark and a mystery.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Like, I would assume that, like, I mean, I guess that in the case that he becomes incapacitated, I know the parties have like some procedure where they pick a new nominee, but I'm not sure if that would result in the election because this is like the 11th hour now. Like at that point, it might be so late that they would have to delay the election or something. And at that point, they may start trying to figure out how to, get those other people who already voted to be able to vote again. But I really don't know how that would work. That certainly would be like a real disaster scenario. But even short of that, I mean, like people have already been talking about this election being resolved in a courtroom because of all this mail-in voting stuff and the complications that could cause. Like the ballots. I think some people are talking about they may take longer to count. This could be like a long and dragged out process where one of the other candidate may be able to dispute it sort of and say like, hey, something's not on the up and up here. I mean, we already had Hillary Clinton suggesting that Biden should not concede under any circumstances and that he should be putting together I think she called a massive legal operation to like fight this in court in case he does lose. And I think she actually said Biden was already doing that, putting together that legal team. So that's not just her idea. So I do just think there is some real trouble we could see with this type of system. Whether, like you're saying, if the candidate becomes incapacitated, that's a big deal. A lot of people have already cast their ballots. But even short of that, there's all kinds of complications we could see with this.
And one of the crazy things, Will, is this is just one of the avenues that people are going to claim that the election was rigged or unfair. We're still dealing with the 2016 hoax, and there is more information, it seems, coming out on that now. John Brennan's recent memo, where we have some details on Obama being briefed and it seeming Hillary Clinton's larger role in coming up with this whole Russiagate thing to cover up her email scandal. But nevertheless, the Russiagate narrative lives on, and to a lot of Americans, I forget who it was, maybe Chris Murphy, I think, was recently suggesting that because Trump had COVID, Vladimir Putin would had to act as more of a surrogate for Trump and really step up Russia's interference in our election because Trump was unable to campaign. And that's, a senator. That narrative lives on. And so even if it's not just the number of ballots that are being thrown out, which ones are being counted, where the mistakes are happening, I'm sure that there's going to be mistakes happen, and some of those mistakes will happen in areas where a disproportionate number of Black Americans or Latino Americans, Asian Americans live. And then there's going to be claims of racial discrimination. Who knows? Maybe some, very nefarious actors within, some election structure would go that far. Or maybe, it's just happen to be, counties, tend to have certain demographics. And so if you send 50,000 ballots out wrong to the inner city, maybe more of them are going to be Black Americans or something like that. But I don't know. These are just all scenarios that I see coming. And I think it's going to, really impact what happens in this country after November 3rd. I guess one
Absolutely.
thing that won't have much of an impact is the second debate that is now officially off. And again, Will, you wrote this one up, and from my understanding, they canceled the debate and didn't actually move it at all, reschedule it, or anything like that. There was an offering potentially to do an online debate, but I heard the Trump camp said no to that. Will, what details do you have on this?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I added an update to this article. I shouldn't take the full credit for the whole thing, but
So
I did
modest.
put some. But yeah, I did put some work into that one. But yeah, like you said, there was all this confusion about what was going to happen after Trump's COVID diagnosis. It wasn't, Biden kind of flip flopped. He had said at first that like he's going to let the experts and the scientists decide whether it'd be safe, and then he started saying that like no, if Trump still has a positive COVID test, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm not going to have any debate. And then this idea of a virtual debate was floated, and Trump refused that. And Trump suggested maybe rescheduling it. I think he wanted to do the second one, like to push that to the date of the third, and then push back the third. But Biden refused that, and so the second debate is now canceled. Um, and I guess the third is still on for October 22nd. So there will still at least be one more debate. But I mean, like even after the first one that between Trump and Biden, like there was a lot of talk that, and this is before we even knew Trump had COVID. Even like just after that debate, there was talk that like at least one of them would be canceled for some reason. Like Wolf Blitzer, like within seconds after the first debate, was like, I don't know if we're going to see another one of these. Like just maybe because of how bad that one he was saying, how bad that went. But nonetheless, yeah, we are now down to just one single debate left at the end of October. There was some pretty weird stuff happening, like right around the time this debate was canceled. Like the night before that happened, the guy who was supposed to moderate the second debate, the C-SPAN editor Steve Scully, his Twitter account sent out this weird tweet saying, "Should I respond to Trump?" And he tagged Anthony Scaramucci, who like Trump's former communications director, who's now like a loud critic of Trump. And so that like triggered all kinds of suspicions of like what does that mean? Like should I respond to Trump? What is what kind of overture did Trump make to this debate moderator? This Scully guy has come out and said that his account was hacked. And so like that's how he's explaining this. And apparently, he's saying someone's just trying to like stir up trouble with this. But another strange thing, like right around the same time, the moderator of the third debate, an NBC reporter, Kristen Welker, her account suddenly was deleted entirely. And I think her people are saying that was just a precaution and stuff, but there's all kinds of suspicion that there's like some weird backroom dealings going on with these moderators and their Twitter handles. And I don't know, I presume what they're saying is true, that it's a hack. I have no evidence to suggest otherwise. But this is like a lot of people are questioning what the hell is going on with these debates. With some of the moderators.
Well, I mean, it does make sense because, at least in the political theater of the U.S. that we live in, don't necessarily agree with all this as a libertarian, but these debates are supposed to be some of the most important political events that occur every 4 years, and a real discussion about the direction of the country, who we should vote for, all that kind of really important stuff. Not that the debate, especially the first one, turned into that at all. But that it was, just so easily canceled, especially since, at least as of today, I know that the debate, I think, was canceled, what, on the 8th or the 9th, but as of today, the 11th, Trump says that his doctor confirms that he has no more COVID, no more symptoms. And so we're still, what 4 days out from the scheduled date of the debate? Wasn't it the 15th?
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
and so if that's the case, it seems kind of like we canceled the debate for no reason. Not really that the country would benefit from another debate. I think actually or anything like that. But yeah, so just an interesting thing, and this is shining a lot of light. I feel on the how the debate commission works. I think it's what commission for presidential debate or something like that. Uh,
Yeah.
with how they're coming out and basically get control everything. Not that I think it would necessarily benefit Joe Jorgensen to be on stage with Trump and Biden or something like that. The way the polling works and everything makes it impossible for a libertarian or really a third party to get on stage. And so people seeing some of that and more to talk about the presidential debate, commission and everything, I think has been at least a little bit of a positive of this election cycle. But Will, anything more on this?
No, I think that's about it. Like you said, it's not like this is such a terrible loss for the country that we're not going to get to see this debate. There will still be another one in late October, and so I don't think it's all that consequential.
Right. I'm guessing that wouldn't be a 2 hour debate on foreign policy, and me and Will would spend several shows breaking down, the new wars that Joe Biden has planned or Trump's, actual detailed plan to pull U.S. troops out of Afghanistan or anything like that. Will,
Right.
let's thank the sponsor of our show and tell the audience about Paloma Verde. And Will, how's the CBD working for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have both had quite a great experience with these Paloma Verde products. They've sent us quite a few to try. They, have liquid extracts, which I think that's the one that packs like the highest dose. But they've also got fruit chew gummies. They have soft gels with different formulations. One has melatonin. That's the one I like. That helps me to, relax at night. But they also have one with curcumin, stuff for inflammation, sore muscles. And it really does make the difference when you go through Paloma Verde because you can actually see their lab results. You can see what you're actually getting. This is not something that you're gonna, like you say, this is not gummy worms that you're buying at the gas station or the head shop or something. This is like really quality product. And so if you want to, see what they have to offer, go to their website, palomaverdestore.com, PALOMAVERDE store.com, and use promo code PEACE to get 25% off your order of over $75.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's get back to the show.
Right.
Next up here, we have this bold new plan that I guess the U.S. military and Elon Musk are teaming up to build a rocket delivery system or a missile delivery system where they're going to have, I guess, this stored somewhere in space and be able to launch these rockets full of missiles, I guess, at 700 or 7,500 miles per hour to deliver them anywhere in the world, and it should be able to get anywhere in about an hour. So, Will, is this the coolest new weapon system that's gonna protect all of America from all of our enemies, or what's going on with this thing?
I mean, it sounds pretty impressive what they're saying. They're saying it could make a trip from like Florida to Afghanistan, which is like 7,600 miles in like just an hour. And whereas like a cargo plane would take 15 hours to do it. So we're talking like 15 times faster than what, an aircraft could do. And unlike an aircraft, a rocket doesn't need to like refuel in midair. It doesn't need permission to fly over foreign airspace. It's harder to shoot down. So there are some advantages, even in addition to the speed. But it basically sounds like a ICBM, but like, instead of carrying a warhead from continent to continent, it's going to carry cargo, which of course I think what they have in mind is like weapons, like you said, either missiles or like it can carry like 80 tons of gear. So like that's like an M1 Abrams tank and some change. So quite a bit of stuff they could haul, they could bring to pretty much any location on Earth in a moment's notice. That's all sounds pretty impressive, but like honestly, this project is kind of alarming to me. Like when you're talking about putting weapons into orbit, I just think that is like a threshold that we shouldn't really be crossing. Like when you start militarizing space, you might begin with cargo. Maybe this begins with just vehicles or something, and you're not talking about real heavy weaponry. But certainly, it's not going to stop there. Like how long until we are talking about real heavy weapons stationed in space? Or I've mentioned before, I think on the show, what happens when the nuclear triad becomes the nuclear quadrad, and we're now talking about nuclear weapons deployed in orbit. I just think this kind of project like opens up a lot of doors and possibilities that we maybe shouldn't be toying with. Like, I'm fully in favor of the commercialization of space, like, mining asteroids and even colonizing, the moon or other planets or whatever. All that stuff I think is great and like is the future of humanity. But like the direction that SpaceX is taking this in, I just don't think I think that's the wrong direction. of militarizing space and putting weapons into orbit and stuff. And we have seen SpaceX like more and more going in this direction. Like, they're contracting with the Pentagon to build, I think, like missile tracking satellites. They've contracted with the new Space Force for like a multi-billion-dollar contract to do rocket launches. So unfortunately, SpaceX is really getting in on like the military gravy train, whereas it seems like before they were more talking about like civilian travel. And in fact, I think the whole like the idea for this cargo transport project, I think that originated with like civilian transport, and they're just like now applying that to the military realm. So I think that's unfortunate. But apparently the deal is done. Like SpaceX has signed its contract with the Pentagon, and they're supposed to start testing next year. So like this apparently is going forward, but they're still not totally sure if if this is even viable yet. Like obviously we can send missiles around, we can put stuff into orbit, but I think they're just wondering like, is this going to be cost effective? Will it be like, useful for the things that they want it for? Because it's a lot of preparation to do a rocket launch. Like you might be able to get to a place in an hour once you have the rocket in orbit, but actually doing that might take months or weeks. So it's not totally clear that this is even going to be like a viable project for the military.
Right. And I'm also concerned just if the military is effectively calculating in the fact that this is going to have a response from other countries, specifically, I think Russia and China, who, if the US starts to militarize space, is going to respond by also militarizing space and trying to either build these kind of weapons or weapons that could take out this US rocket or something like that. They're going to feel like this could be used against them, so they're going to have to at the very least build defenses, if not build equivalent like offensive or even upgraded offensive capabilities to counter what the US is doing with this. So my guess is that probably the part of the Pentagon that's teaming up with Musk here and everything isn't really considering that aspect of it. That's probably a different department, and it's only going to increase this. Also, I think you bring up a really good point there with that. This is a part of the trend of SpaceX moving away from the civilian type of economic kind of real capitalism of bringing people to space, colonizing space, finding ways to reach different parts of what's around the earth, and help it to enrich the rest of the planet, but rather now just moving into like the kind of trap of the Pentagon budget, where they'll get a bunch of money, but they're not going to develop technologies that effectively benefit the rest of us and are things that people are really excited for and really want, which has kind of been what Elon Musk has attempted to do, I guess, is deliver products that people really want. But now he seems like Jeff Bezos and the rest of them have found that it's just so much easier to get the money from the Pentagon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so much easier when an institution just like gathers up billions and trillions of dollars from other people and can just hand it out like that instead of having to actually compete for it. Go figure.
Last up today, Will, is Israel is advancing new plans to build 4,400 new settlement homes, mostly outside of the current settlement blots, which means is essentially expanding the settlements, territorial wise, and taking up more of the West Bank from the Palestinians. And from what we've seen with the deal of the century and other, the more current proposals for the Israel Palestine solution, it's essentially to take all the areas that have Israeli settlements on those, make those Israel proper, and then leave the rest of it to, kind of continue to be the not really Palestinian state, but Palestinian refugee camp of the West Bank or something like that. And
Right.
as Ramsey Baroud has documented and written in recent months, there's Palestinians that are living in caves because they're unable to get building permits to build on land that's historically, their family and that they rightfully own. And now the Israeli government's coming in, going to allow 4,400 new homes, but specifically not for the Palestinians, only for Israeli settlers. So, you gotta have the benefit there. Well, do you have any other details of this plan that you think are important?
Yeah, yeah. So, like you said, there's 4,400 that are like, about to be approved. They're at various different stages of approval. I think 2,000 are like about to get final approval, and those are like, all but, those are all but a done deal. Whereas like the remaining 2,400, I think, are at earlier stages of approval where people can still file objections and stuff. But not that I don't think they cancel them too often based on Palestinian objections. But nonetheless, these are going to happen in sort of a staggered it's a staggered process. Some of the units that they're trying to get approval for have actually already been built. They were built illegally, and then sometimes they do this like retroactive approval. And that's particularly the ones that you're talking about that are called in isolated settlements that are like away from like the major main settlement blocks that already exist. And so these new ones sort of like entrench these smaller settlements and make them harder to ever uproot in the event of any kind of, in the unlikely event of any kind of peace deal or something that ends the occupation or something that would create a Palestinian state. Like you will have to like do something about some of these settlement blocks. And some of the larger ones are sort of already like that's already irreversible. Those are already built. There's already thousands of people living there. But these more like smaller isolated ones, like those aren't quite irreversible yet. And by growing those, like you do sort of like you add to the complication for any future potential deal to resolve the occupation of the West Bank. Like over the summer, Israeli officials were talking about annexing a huge chunk of the West Bank, largely the settlement blocks. But right now, there basically is a de facto annexation because of the settlements. Like they carve up the West Bank. They're built on a lot of the best real estate with the best resources and water resources and all that stuff. They're protected by the Israeli military. So this basically is Israel, but this area is totally cut off from the Palestinians. So there's sort of a de facto annexation going on because of these settlements. And by growing them and by expanding them, allowing thousands more units to be built, like they're doing now, it's a pretty substantial project. You are just making it more and more complicated to ever resolve resolve this dispute, resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict. They're doing what they call creating facts on the ground, where they just make a situation so irreversible and undoable that you can never remove those settlers.
Right. Well, and then with that, I think it does go to show a little bit too that Israel really isn't as serious about finding a solution here as the mainstream media pretends they are, and it's portrayed where it's the Palestinians that reject the deal of the century, the Palestinians that claim the UAE isn't doing enough for them when they sign normalization deals with Israel, and it's the problem is with them. But you see that, even when they sign the normalization deals, Israel continues their slow march towards, again, as you say, establishing the facts on the ground that essentially is, I guess, going to make it that the Palestinians are just third-class citizens of Israel, but isolated to their little like Bantustan type areas, and that's just going to be the situation for them. And there's no real serious plan on the Israeli side to actually start to create the situation on the ground that will allow for a Palestinian state and a real resolution to the situation here, or start to create a situation where they just make Palestinians citizens of Israel with full rights and everything. It doesn't seem like either of those are going to happen. Anything else,
No.
Will?
No, the last thing I was gonna mention is this, like, I think it's worth pointing out, neither you and we're not that concerned with like international law. I think we think those are sort of arbitrary constructs, but it is worth noting that like the settlements are against international law. The UN has decided against them over and over again that you're not allowed to, colonize and settle territory that you obtain by military conquest. And that is effectively what the Israelis have been doing since 1967, and they, just continued to do for decades. And they're about to, expand that even further with these new settlements. So, I think that's worth pointing out, just the international law element of that.
Right. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. For everybody, support the show by finding it on YouTube at Conflicts of Interest, or it should be up on most of the podcatchers at this point. You can find it on Facebook at Conflicts of Interest. The Twitter account is at con_interest. Find me on Twitter at Kyle Anzalone_. Will Porter is at the Will Porter. And then if you want to donate to the show, you could do that at patreon.com/conflicts of interest. Me and Will are eventually going to announce some Patreon tiers and some bonuses that we'll have available for everyone. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Cal. Bye, everybody.